Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Faster Masters Rowing Radio. It's now the 1st of July in New Zealand, 30th of June in the rest of the world, except for Australia, and I'm really pleased to be here again. I'm Rebecca Caro, and as ever, I'm joined by Marlene Royal.
Hello, Faster Masters. Here we are again.
Let's kick off with just a brief mention for our sponsors. Sponsors are increasingly important for us. We're trying to improve the quality of our shows and all of the hardware and software that goes behind them. Please, if you can, help rowing retailers recover. We are building a giant rowing retailer page where we'd like to feature as many as possible. Please send us a link to your favorite rowing product, just a web link, and we will get in touch with them and seek permission to feature them on the page. Our idea is just to have a resource where anyone can go. So when someone says, hey, what rowing shoes are out there? There's one place where everything is listed, and it's then super easy and you can do your research really easily. So that's the big plan. It's not going to happen immediately, but I am looking seriously at it. Now, that will be right across the Rowing Chat podcast network, not just for Faster Masters. Now, today we're live, and so if you're watching live, hello. Nice to see you. And please, if you have a question or a comment, you can write it in the comment section below the live stream. And hopefully we will see it and read it out on air, and we can get your answers. We're going to kick off with a topic that is probably timely: rethinking the Olympic Games. Now, there's a whole thread of rethinking everything from the climate crisis to our economy to unemployment legislation, everything going on at the moment. But I was particularly drawn by two things that happened this week. The first was this: Dame Katherine Grainger of the British rowing team, who was previously she is the most medaled female Olympian from Great Britain. And she's part of a series of micro podcasts done by the BBC, which you can pick up in Spotify, called Rethink. And each expert talks about their area of interest. And this one, she talks about rethinking the Olympics. And what was so interesting was that she had gone back to research the historic Olympics, not just the modern Olympic Games, and that they were created in a time of upheaval. She reminds us that the warring tribes of ancient Greece used the games as a way of translating sport into athletic prowess. And I can obviously see that there's a direct link that Baron de Coubertin saw, when he was conceiving the modern Olympics. So what should the Olympic Games be for? Why should we have them? Marlene, what's your view on this?
I think I know my opinion of the Olympics when I was a very young girl was, it was my dream to be an Olympian, like from the age of 4. And I actually didn't achieve that. But I did devote a fair portion of my life towards that goal. And in my opinion, being an Olympian or striving for the Olympics is something that represents striving to reach the highest potential that you possibly can. So I probably look at it in a more of the amateur sense versus the professional money-making ordeal that it is now. I think it in its purest form, it's sort of pursuing the human endeavor. And certainly, the original sports like rowing and biathlon, and I mean, they were very, there weren't they were individual sports: running, jumping, rowing. I don't know if swimming was one of the
Titius,
first,
Altius, Fortius.
Mm-hmm.
Higher, stronger, faster.
So to me, that's what the Olympic ideal means. And also, when in news reporting, oftentimes you'll hear an expression, so and so is a defending Olympic or a former Olympic champion. And stylistically, that's not correct, because once you are an Olympic champion, you are always an Olympic champion. It's not like a world champion, where you can be a defending world champion or you can be a former world champion. Once you are an Olympian or an Olympic gold medalist, you are always an Olympic champion. So no matter the age or how many years has passed, that person should actually always be called the Olympic champion so-and-so. But
I take your point. It's interesting you mentioned the money and the professionalization of the sport, because the other article I spotted this week came from the newspaper The Economist, and they asked a slightly different question, recognizing that the future of the modern Olympic Games depends on a large number of TV viewers as well as in-person viewers. And obviously that is all under challenge at the moment. And that the funding for the International Olympic Committee only comes from the broadcasting and the sponsorship that is associated with a 2-week athletic competition every 4 years. So that's it. They ask whether or not the Olympics should look seriously at including very popular sports which are not traditional Olympic sports. Now, we know that the Olympic Games has introduced new sports to the Olympics quite regularly and occasionally dropped older sports, which obviously rowing, lightweight rowing, has been dropped. It is going to end its relationship with the Olympics. But the sport that they named was electronic gaming. They said, should Fortnite be included in the Olympic Games? Are these people athletes?
In my opinion, no. Sport and games, I think, are two different things. And I mean, you could dive into the sociology of sport, which talks a great deal about the difference between games and play and competitive sport. But do we want to call it the Olympics? Again, the Olympics is traditionally connected to sports. Then you have to include chess.
Oh my God, and bridge.
And bridge, and which I would say are, traditional intellectual sports. I mean, most serious chess players are also very good athletes. Almost every international chess player probably trains on some level. Now, is ping pong in the Olympics?
Yeah, table tennis, very much.
Yeah, table tennis. So, I mean, that's a very high. A lot of chess players actually play table tennis. A lot of chess players swim, because they need to be, obviously, to mentally be in good shape. You need to physically be strong. I mean, chess requires an enormous amount of concentration and endurance. So they do need physical abilities to play chess very well. They're probably, the answer is probably somewhat generational. I mean, younger generations may say, hey, why not? And is it a spectator sport? I mean,
the answer
I don't,
yes.
For some. I mean, I personally have never played a computer game in my entire life.
Oh my God. Really?
Ever. And never. I've never touched one. Ever. I remember never. I remember when it was they were invented in the late 70s or early 80s. And I thought, oh my Lord, why are people doing this? Anyway, I have never I don't even know what an electronic game looks like. So I'm kind of a fossil in a sense. I was much happier riding my bike and rowing, and that was kind of, I wanted to be outside. And the last thing I wanted to do was be inside all the time. But again, if Olympics is a commercial endeavor and they need to increase the revenues, and now, the International Olympic Committee trickles, I mean, if that's the money source, that trickles down to all the Olympic committees of the various countries, which then trickles down to all the national federations for all the sports of different companies, of different countries. That's a lot of money. I mean, is there another way to raise money? Why is it just that one event? I mean, is there something else that could fund this? But I don't know. As it becomes more and more commercial, my interest in it is less and less. I do really appreciate the athletes, and I'm interested to watch the Olympics because I'm interested in the performance of the athletes who can perform at an incredibly high level. That's what's interesting, just to watch them, even without knowing their scores or anything. That's what I appreciate about the Olympics. You could question the whole idea of who represents what country. I mean, certain countries buy athletes or invite athletes from other countries who have nothing to do with that country, who are not born in the country, who represent that country, who are of different nationalities. Should that be more geared to, who is from which country? That's another thing. You can win certain events if you import athletes from a country that's strong in one sport and bring them to another country. Like, for example, South Korea has invited numerous Russian biathletes to ski for South Korea. Now, and there,
track and field,
there's track and field is a huge. Marlene Adi, who was a Jamaican sprinter, became a citizen of Slovenia and ran for Slovenia. So, should athletes be trading between countries? And, these are all ethical. They're sort of ethical questions if you look at the whole Olympic perspective. I'm not necessarily saying it's right or wrong, but it is something that happens in football teams. It's something that happens in track and field. So how pure do we want the Olympics to be, I guess, is the fundamental question.
Yeah, I personally have no problem with adding, let's call them non-traditional sports. I actually think it would be to grow the audience for the Olympic Games into sports that lots of countries don't already participate in. I have no problem with that whatsoever. And I actually personally don't mind if electronic sports are included. However, I do have one caveat, which is the Olympic Games should be the pinnacle blue ribboned achievement for that sport. And so, for example, the Soccer World Cup is the gold ribbon, I keep saying it wrong, the blue ribboned event for football, but the Olympics is not, but it's included in the Olympics. Now, I accept that it might take time for the Olympic competition, to outclass, but I think that is part of what the Olympics should be for a sport. It should be sufficiently important that the sport is orientated to make it a major achievement. And so that aligns with some of the Olympic ideals. And I look to things like, there's a very popular conference, which I've been to in the past, called South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. This started as a film festival. Then they added on music. Actually, I think it's the other way around. Music first, then film. And then they added on interactive. So what happened was a 3-day event became a 5-day event, became a 10-day event. And I think that the Olympic organizers could do well to look at the different cadres of sport and map them into the different weeks of competition. So at the moment, everybody who follows rowing knows that rowing is always a week 1 Olympic event, because flatwater kayaking takes the same venue and uses it in the second week. And in between, on the changeover, they have the open water swim, which is a relatively new event. I'm so sure that the scheduling could be set up such that newer sports could be, into a later week. I do accept that the opening and closing ceremonies constrain that to some degree, but what's to stop you having these events, since they could be virtual? Can they be done in a conference center rather than a traditional sporting venue? So of course that lowers the cost to the host city. If anything can be live streamed, which of course it can nowadays, I personally have absolutely no problem if that brings in a bigger audience and bigger dollars. Personally, like you, I will choose which sports I want to watch.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that it's a possibility, and I think losing the Olympics would be a whole load worse.
Yes, I would agree. I would agree with that. I think that there are sport, like if this electronic sport was included, for example, it can also happen at any time of day or night because it's indoors, and the time frame doesn't matter. And if rowing, for example, since we're from rowing, and I know that you've had some very interesting discussion with Volker Nolte about the future of the Olympics and rowing too, which is a very good rowing chat podcast. That if you can get more people generally watching the Olympics, you have a greater chance of some new people discovering sports that they don't know or have never heard of, or perhaps never been exposed to, especially these days, because you can watch your events on demand quite easily. So it's not like years ago when we had to rely only on what they were showing us on television. And on American television, they showed certain sports and you never saw other sports. And those of us who lived close to the border used to watch more rowing on Canadian channels.
Oh, really?
Back in the old days, right? It's now everything is different because through your cable company you can watch any event, you can get it online. It's a completely different world now. Years ago we never saw World Cup races, and I actually used to travel a lot, and part of my traveling was in fact to go to Europe as often as I could to watch Eurosport, particularly during the rowing season when there were World Cup races, because years ago we couldn't see the World Cup races in the United States on American television. So I used to go try to organize my trips to Europe around World Cup times. If I couldn't go to the World Cup, I would videotape, like these cassettes, those big things. I would bring it back home to Vermont, to Craftsbury. We'd translate it into, American mode for VCRs because, PAL mode was different. And then we used to watch the World Cup races. But, way back in the day, that was the only way that we got to see those races. Unlike now, it's just such a luxury to go on the, World Rowing site and you can, let's watch the men's single from this race. You couldn't do that 20 years ago.
Believe it or not, in New Zealand, you still cannot, because Sky TV bought the broadcast rights. And so you can only see the World Cup races through Sky. They geo-block the World Rowing website for the live stream for us.
Yeah, and Eurosport was geo-blocked in North America. So yes. even if you had the app, if you were in Europe, you could watch it, but if you were in North America, you could not. So
there we go.
Yeah.
Moving on. If you want to ask us a question ahead of time and get a very detailed answer, we have 3 prices for asking a question. The lowest price is for an email response, and the highest price is for a private Zoom video response face-to-face with you, and the intermediate one is for coming on the Rowing Chat podcast. And you can get that link at fastermastersrowing.com, and it's /register/question-email. Now, we got a question. Oh, before we move on, I want to show you my t-shirt. I don't know if you can see this, but it's a glorious photograph, graphic design image. And the title says, "The Curve Crusher." And my brother sent me this. It's a man called Ashley Bloomfield, and he is the New Zealand COVID-19 expert that they put on the news. And he's now become a feature of pop culture. So he's kind of like the Anthony Fauci or the Chris Whitty of New Zealand. So yeah, get your shirts online. I'm sure I'm sure you can all do that. Now, we picked up this question about sculling to lose weight. Let me read to you what the questioner asks. Obviously, this year it's not possible for Sweep Masters teams to get on the water, so I've taken up sculling once a week. In terms of fitness goals, is 3 times a week sufficient for weight loss? Should I throw in some erging in the gym? And he then says, yes, diet is important as well, I know, but rowing burns a lot of calories when compared to most other exercise. Marlene, what's your take on this question?
My first question to our reader would be, how many times were you sweep rowing per week? Like if you were sweep rowing 3 times a week and your goal was losing weight and you were losing weight, and now you switch to sculling, I would think that you would have a positive response to losing weight if you started sculling, because you might burn more calories because you're probably not going to be as efficient sculling as you are sweep rowing. So the more efficient you are, it depends, of course, on your intensity, but let's talk about like a long distance row. You know, the more efficient you are, you're probably the lower number of calories you're going to burn. However, the more efficient you are, perhaps the harder you can row. So you're going to burn more calories. But I would say, so one, it depends how hard you're rowing. But I would say if we're comparing apples to apples, right? You're doing the same type of rowing that you were doing in your sweep boat, but now you're doing it sculling. I would guess that you would probably burn more sculling because you're going to be less efficient technically. So you're going to be using a lot of little muscles that you might not normally use. And, you know, your range of motion with your muscle range of motion might be slightly different. I always tell people, if you want to lose weight, move more. Move more. And you can control your diet to a certain degree, but, you know, you can't drop below a certain number of calories per day and function well. You know, if you get below a certain number of calories, which is, you know, if say you weigh 140 pounds, you know, you need 1,400 calories if you weigh 140 pounds just for your metabolism and your brain to function. You can't drop below that. Plus, then you add in your amount, your activity in the day, what type of job you have. Then you add in your exercise calories that you typically burn, and then you shave 500 off that, and that should be enough to stimulate weight loss. So you will lose weight if you are creating a calorie deficit. So again, it depends how active your day is. It depends that you have to look at the big picture of how many calories do you require for your metabolism, your job, and your exercise. Add that up, and then take 500 calories off of that. And or if that's hard, start with 300, but you have to create a deficit. So I like to tell people, lose your weight by increasing your activity and increase your calorie burn that way. Now, this might, in some cases, be you add a 30-minute walk per day, you know, or you start taking the stairs, or, you know, there's lots of ways that you can build activity into your day to burn an extra 200 calories, right? Or you can not have that extra beer every day, or not have the beer every day, you know, and decrease it. Now, some people say, I'm not giving that up, I'll give up some. Fine, but burn it somewhere, you know, because, you know, it is a calorie deficit. And when you come down to it, it's a matter of choosing the foods that help you be successful. And there are numerous diets to do that, but you can definitely lose weight sculling as long as you're creating a calorie deficit. And I would say 3 times a week. In my book, I would say go for 5 if you can. Try to do 5 sessions, try to do 6 sessions a week. They don't all have to be the same length. If you're not used to exercising 6 days a week, maybe you can add in just 30 minutes an extra 2 days a week. That's still going to help you create a calorie deficit. So yes, I would say yes, sculling can help you, but you have to look at the big picture.
The person starts the question saying that it's not possible for sweep teams to get on the water. So I think this person is a novice sculler. And so I'm going to caveat what Marlene said, and she's absolutely right. It's about your energy output. If you are a beginner sculler, definitely get on the water. Do it in a single scull, but alternate with doing it in a double or a quad if you can, for the simple reason that if you're in a very unstable environment, you're unlikely to work very hard until your technique is sufficient for you to put effort in that's equivalent to your sweep effort. But with that regard, I think Marlene's given a great framework for anyone to take a look at their own personal circumstances and decide whether rowing or sculling, taking the stairs, erging, are an appropriate part of their own weight loss desire program. It's coming up to the 1st of July, and Faster Masters publishes its new program on the 1st of each month. Marlene, what's in the July program?
In our July program, which is already live because it is July 1st in New Zealand, and we have a lot of Faster Masters in New Zealand and Australia. Our technical module is a video of a drill called backing into the catch, and Rebecca does an excellent job demonstrating this video, and she demonstrates it in a single, and she also for those of you who are a member of our crew membership, she also goes into how to apply this to a crew boat as well. And it builds on the erg suspension drill that we talked about last June. And the training and land programs are focused on 1K event and a 5K event. So even though our racing schedule is topsy-turvy this year, we are still encouraging people to focus on their 1K event as if they would have that, like, create a pseudo regatta at the time that you would have your championship race. It's really good to stay on that schedule. Your body understands this training schedule. It also helps you prepare for the fall season, because some of the work we do for 1K in June and July also helps us in our fall preparation. The 5K program obviously focuses on an October or November event, and we all have our fingers crossed that there will be some. I'm confident that there will be. We just simply don't know which ones at this point. Our performance module focuses on quick boat setup. So if you get into a boat at a club, you're using other people's equipment, club equipment, it's a list of what to check when you get in the boat to make sure that you're set up quickly and effectively for the boat. So it reviews the height and foot stretcher adjustments, heel height, these types of adjustments that you can do fairly easily when you get into a club boat. Our rowing lifestyle module gives you some stories about water bottle mixes. So I'll let you read those are pretty good. And then our bonus module has a rigging challenge, and we present our rowers with 3 to 4 possible challenges of how to change their rigging and see how that affects how they feel in the boat.
That's such a great challenge, and I'm not going to spoil it by saying what it is, but no. I will reflect on something that I personally did back in the day. I used to be good friends with the man who invented the Row Perfect rowing machine, Casper Riekers, and I represented his business in the UK and Ireland for many years. And one of the things that he told us to do was, when you're on any rowing machine, you know how you have the fan vent adjustment, which adjusts the load on the fan. And he had a really interesting principle, which I think is worth a lot of people learning, which is that the setup in your boat should be the same as the setup on the erg. But how do you know? And so he dragged an erg down to the dock at his lovely little rowing club in Northern Holland. And he had his wife's single and his single, and he had a whole bunch of us go and row 500 meters out and back, just not very far. Wasn't even 500, in a boat, pull into the dock and park it, and then leap immediately onto the rowing machine and row the same sort of rate cadence that you've been doing in the boat, and to say whether or not it felt similar. And then we made an adjustment to the resistance on the rowing machine until it felt the same. Back in the boat, another short lap out and back onto the rowing machine. And it was a really, really interesting experiment, and so worthwhile.
Now, did he adjust it for you, or you got on the machine and then you had to adjust it to what you thought felt the same as the boat?
Yeah, but he helped us. I said, can you make it heavier? Can you make it lighter? So yeah. But it was so worthwhile. And it does it's one of those little things that made me realize the importance of aligning your land training with the rowing action. And the other time that I had that was when we were doing weight training, and our trainer said, you should do your weightlifting in the same cadence as in the boat. So you should have a rapid drive phase and a slower recovery phase. And, we did this slightly more when we were doing higher repetition weights. So, 20 plus reps per item. But it was really, really interesting. Do your squat, down slowly, up fast.
Yes. And since we're probably from the similar school of rowing, when I was training, we at high school and at a club, and also in university, and even later on, we did a lot of things like that too in our land training, which mimic stroke rating, which also focused on rhythm, the rhythm of the recovery, the rhythm of the drive. Particularly some of the Russian coaches that I worked with, that was a very, very big aspect of anything we did on land had to be done in the rhythm of the stroke. But today, if we talk to our strength coaches, they take a very different perspective on that from the purely strength aspect, because the feeling is that you do so much endurance work already. You do so much endurance work already in the boat, on the erg. And granted, back then we didn't do as much erg work as I think probably people do now, because we didn't have, ergs were relatively new. I got one of the first Concept 2s in the BU Boathouse in 1981. So, ergs were new. When I was in high school, there were no such thing as Concept 2 ergs. But now the strength coaches for rowing would say focus more on the things that are going to help you row better in terms of injury prevention, strength, opposing motions, not necessarily doing the strength endurance work as your weight session, when you could probably use those strength sessions better. But those types of exercises were very useful from the point of view of coordination and of learning rhythm. Like if you knew what your 28 stroke rate was on land, you could really target that easier in the boat. So I'm sure that there's always a place for different types of exercises, as long as you balance your approach and you use them in an appropriate way. So you could do that type of work even with a broomstick. But working on your cadence and your rhythm and your coordination, and so there'd be lots of ways to work on cadence on land besides the erg and the boat too.
For sure. Now, moving on, we had a question from Elizabeth Bugert about heart rate straps. And she asked, does anyone know if you can connect a Garmin watch and a Speedcoach on the same heart rate strap? And if yes, which ones would you recommend? And there was some intense discussion in the Masters Rowing International Facebook group, and these were the range of answers. The first one was a recommendation that they use the Vivo Fit to record the session, but their stroke coach, which was a Coxmate GPS, displays the heart rate but does not record it. And this person used a Garmin chest strap. Another said they have a 935, which is a Garmin Forerunner, and a Speedcoach. So that's the NK product. And one strap works for me. The Garmin HRM dual strap should guarantee it works. So that's one heart rate strap that has two outputs to two devices. A third person says the Wahoo Ticker is good and a reasonable price too. And his Wahoo works fine with a Speedcoach and the Vivo Active at the same time. Another says that the Polar H10 can broadcast 2 Bluetooth channels and ANT Plus at the same time. And a last one is a Garmin Forerunner, which goes both to an NK Speedcoach and a Wahoo Ticker X. And he can see his heart rate on the Speedcoach and record the workout on the Garmin at the same time, which seems to me to be the same setup as the Vivo Fit and Coxmate. So I will put links to all of these products into the show notes so that you can go and have a look for yourself if that's a setup that you would like to have. So you can connect your Garmin and your Speedcoach at the same time on a heart rate strap.
I would add, if you're going to train by heart rate, take the extra step to get some physiological testing, because if you don't correlate your heart rate to your blood lactate levels, you are not going to know whether you're training properly or not. So, so it is important not to estimate your heart rate based on that formula 220 minus your age, or that is not for an athletic population, and it can err greatly. If you want to be accurate, go the extra step and find a physiology lab or a gym that can do a blood, or a rowing coach perhaps in your area that can do a lactate threshold test and correlate your heart rate to your blood lactate levels. And then you will know what your proper zones are. And then you have to retest those on a regular basis. Perhaps every 3 months you have to retest, because hopefully you will get into better shape, which means that your heart rate zones are going to change. And so with training, as those rates change, you have to adjust what those zones are. But if you don't correlate your heart rate to what's going on inside of you, you're really stabbing in the dark, and it might make you feel great, but you really don't know what's happening. This is one reason why a lot of the training that I prepare, especially for the erg, is based on performance paces, which is based off a 20-minute trial. You can also use those paces on the water, but on the water we have to take into consideration might not always be flat. You're going to have variability because of current and wind. So I write my workouts on the water based on stroke rate. You know, it's the assumption that you are always rowing full pressure, and you monitor your intensity by stroke rate. Performance paces are, by the way, extremely accurate, and I've tested a number of people on ergs and then had them almost simultaneously do blood lactate tests, and we have compared the tests, and they are very, very, very close. So if you do a good 20-minute test, that's going to give you a very good range. And the importance of using either of these tests is that it makes sure that you're either training at a low enough intensity or a high enough intensity, and that you're avoiding what we call the garbage zone, which is fish nor meat, somewhere in the middle, where you're rowing too hard for it to be low intensity and not hard enough for it to be the adaptation for high intensity. So you can, if you've got access to a lab, by all means, you know, it's a little bit more specific, but the performance paces are quite accurate if you row a very good 20-minute test. And the purpose is to prevent you from overtraining.
Yeah.
You know, that's the main goal. You mentioned, is it Whoop, right? Is one of the heart rate monitors?
Wahoo.
I believe that they also have, and there are some other apps that you can monitor your heart rate variability, and this is something that helps you determine how recovered you are and how your body is reacting to training and what are the trends in a particular training phase. So it's called heart rate variability, and it actually looks at not only your heart rate, but it looks at the little dips in the chart, the little dips between your heart rate and their variations in that. And that can give indications of what the condition is of your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the one that calms you down, and what your sympathetic nervous system is, which is the fight or flight reaction. And so it can give you an overall assessment over time. You track it, you know, and once you get, say, 20, 30, 40 days, it'll start to give you trends. So some of these chest straps will connect to apps that can give you that very good information. And I would say on a day-to-day basis, you want to know how well you're recovering and whether you should go hard the next day or whether you should limit your intensity and let yourself recover a little bit more. So that's another good use of heart rate straps.
It is. And just as a reminder to people, if you are going to use the training zones, which is what we advocate on Faster Masters, your 20-minute test that Marlene mentioned comes free with any of our paid subscriptions. Subscriptions are the monthly recurring memberships. So you can get a hold of that and use it over and over. Now we have a question from Penny Johnson. Hi, Penny. She says, do you like the Garmin watches for heart rate monitoring? Short answer, Penny, is any reasonably accurate watch is good. There's no like or dislike. Find one that suits your price range, with the caveat, as Marlene says, that if you choose to train by heart rate, you do need to have a deep understanding of your personal physiology. It may be more straightforward, cheaper, to actually train using our training zones method, which does not require you to buy a heart rate monitor and to have blood lactate testing.
Or by stroke rate in the boat.
By stroke rate in the boat, exactly. Now, to wrap up today, there was a very long and entertaining discussion, which I will link to in the show notes on the Masters Rowing International Facebook group, about how to name a boat. Now, I'm going to kick off and explain that I have owned 2 singles in my life, and that I bought from you, and 2 doubles. And both times I really struggled to name the single, and I found it absolutely no problem whatsoever to name the doubles. So my first double was called Duet, spelled D-U-E-T-T-E, because it was a women's double, so I feminized the duo. And of course, it was also a little play on words because it was a scull or a sweep. So it was a double pair. And Duet was and still is an absolutely lovely boat. And actually, I wonder who owns her now. Somebody who knows Susanna Holt in Cambridge, who bought it off of Susanna, I think. So, yeah. Now, Marlene, have you ever named your boats?
2 boats. And I've only owned 2 singles myself as well. And my first boat was named Finsa. And Finsa is the name of a mountain in northern Norway. And I've actually never been to Norway, but I really liked the name, so I named my boat Finsa. That boat was number 11 that Ted Van Dusen built. It was a 1974 boat, and they say it was a sister boat to the boat Joan Lind rode in the Montreal Olympics. And that boat, it actually, when it was 40 years old, I think it actually broke in half and went down to the bottom of Kitividi Lake in St. John's, Newfoundland. So that boat is no longer with us anymore. but she served very, very long, and she weighed only 26 pounds. So she was a wonderful little boat to row. And I actually think Ginny Gilder rowed her one year and won the Head of the Charles in it before I owned it. And my current boat is named Gila, as in the Gila monster. So I think I was training down south, kind of desert, hot atmosphere. Maybe I was thinking about skimming over the water or something like that. But that's the name of my current boat.
I do think that monsters are a definite theme.
Okay.
Tim Gardner, it was Katherine Gross who started this conversation. Tim Gardner says, mine are called pachyderm and my last one was mastodon. There's a theme here. Slightly overweight, past my best, nearly prehistoric. I must be a master.
So great.
Christopher Anton remarked that he saw a boat single in Munich, which was called Keine Kanu, which basically means not a canoe in German.
That's great.
Kirsten Wadelich then replied, one of our club singles is called Besser Lijedro.
Ooh.
And I wondered for a long time what the meaning was till somebody told me in German, Besser als jede Droge means better than any drug. He just pushed all the words together. Someone put his boat is called Private Boat, and he's mounted it upside down so that anyone who's reading it knows not to take it.
Oh, that's good.
And Hugh McLeod, who is an Australian, says his boat is called Far Canal, which, if you say it with an Australian accent, you can probably guess it sounds like Far Canal. And there is a boat at Abbotsford Rowing Club in Sydney, which Fee Gladys came back with, which says wide load, which I think is quite good.
That's actually the name of the at Boston University, the guys who row out of BU who are not university students, their boat club is named Wide Load Boat Club.
Which is nearly as good as the one in Cambridge, which is populated by research scientists, which is called the Maximum Entropy Boat Club.
Oh, great. I've rowed in 8s like that. So.
I think we may come back to boat names another time.
I know.
Comments here.
God.
Charlotte says she was named by boat. She persisted.
She persisted. My double is named after Bill Connect. My double, I didn't name the boat, but it's named William Connect, and Bill Connect rowed in the 1964 U.S. men's gold medal 8. So the name of my double is the William Connect.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Penny tells us, I'm about to name my single, and I'm thinking of naming it Mr. Blue Sky, wishful thinking in chilly Ballarat. Well, Mr. Blue Sky sounds wonderful, Penny, and if you do name it, please share a photo with us. We would love to see it. So that's it for this week's Faster Masters Rowing Radio. We're going to take a break for a couple of weeks. I'm going away. Marlene says it's getting hot and she'd like a break too. So we will be back on the 21st of July, and we very much look forward to having you all along for the ride then. Till next time. Bye-bye from me.
Goodbye, everybody. See you in 2 weeks.